جنبي قاعدين على باب البيت
يعني داخلين الأرض
مقاومين وكأنهم منفلتين عن القانون.
Shalom, BradTV and our brothers in Korea and around the world. We've got to finish the book of Ezekiel. I know that I have not kept up with the recordings. The reason is very simple. I've been sick and going oftentimes to the hospital for tests. And my wife also has been sick and going to the hospital and emergency rooms in the last couple of months. So I apologize for that. But we've got to finish with Ezekiel. We got almost to the end of Ezekiel. Today, we're going to finish Ezekiel from chapter 40 to chapter 46. And in a way, I actually dreaded getting into this part of Ezekiel. Why? Because this part of Ezekiel has in it the plan of building the third temple in Jerusalem. The first temple was by Solomon. The second temple was by Herod the Great in the time of the apostles, in the times of Yeshua, of Jesus. It was functioning. And between the temple of Solomon, that then was destroyed by the Assyrians and Babylonians, and the temple of Herod, that was built in the BC, before Yeshua's birth. And then the Romans in 70 AD destroyed Herod's temple, and it has not been rebuilt till now. And Ezekiel, who lived in the diaspora, who lived in Babylon, is prophesying some pretty harsh, difficult prophecies about Israel. Like Hosea and like Amos and like the other prophets, he was very harsh about Israel's sins. You know, if it was in the New Testament what Ezekiel was saying about Israel, all the Jews would say it's anti-Semitic. I believe that there is no anti-Semitism in the New Testament, but a lot of Jews and some Christians that are a little bit out of touch with the biblical reality also think that some of the statements in the Gospels are anti-Semitic. I don't think so. People you love sincerely and you care for sincerely, you have to sometimes tell them that they are wrong. Correct them. It is a command in the Torah and in the New Testament for a brother to point out to another brother something that he is doing or thinking or preaching or teaching or doing wrong. We are commanded to do that in the book of Hebrews. We're commanded to do that in other New Testament texts. We are to correct one another with love. But when one brother is wrong, we have to correct him with love. Not hold back. Not take what is jalapeno pepper and cover it with salt and sugar and cream and chocolate. No. We are commanded, if we love our brother, the Torah commands us, Azov ta'avod zov imo, help him. Help him get it straight. It's a command. Okay. Chapter 40 to chapter 46 of the prophet Ezekiel. With this, we're going to end. Okay. Ezekiel is speaking. And he says, and he brought me back to the door of the house, and behold, water was flowing out of under the threshold of the house in front. For the front of the house was front, and the water was flowing down from under the right shoulder of the house from the south to the altar. What an opening. What an opening. Now, Ezekiel was in Babylon. And we have in chapter 8, God miraculously in seconds brings him in with a supersonic jet, holding him by the long hair that he had, carrying him in seconds all the way to Jerusalem, landing him inside the temple precinct to where the women of Israel, the Jewish women, the Israel, were worshipping one of the worst idols in the Middle East. In the Greek word, the Roman word, the god Demeter. In the Hebrew world, it was the god Tammuz. You know that in the Old Testament, the names of the months that Israel had were very simple. The first month, the second month, the third month, the fourth month, no names. You can see that very clearly in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1 and 2 and 3. It says, on the first month of the year, you shall celebrate on the 14th day your exodus, deliverance from Egyptian slavery, Passover. But when they come back from the 70 years with Ezra and Nehemiah in Babylon, they lived in New York by the Euphrates. Big city, rich city, royal city. They brought with them what? They brought with them the pagan, idolatrous calendar, just like the Christian calendar. The names of the gods are there. Mars, July, Juno. So our months today in the Hebrew calendar are pagan, just like the Christian calendar. Really pagan? Bar Cheshvan, idol. Tevet, idol. Sivan, idol. So they came back from, as Ezekiel was taken from Babylon to Jerusalem. Apparently he stayed here for a while. I don't know if he went back to Babylon, and now he's back in Jerusalem, and he's in the temple, and he sees a vision, not a reality. A river of water is flowing from underneath the threshold of the house of the Lord, south of the altar, the big altar in the temple. A river. And that river, we find out later, is going to flow eastward toward the Dead Sea and revive the Dead Sea. Now, what's interesting is I live not far from Arimathea, where Joseph of Arimathea came from, and Samuel came from there as well. Ramah, the Old Testament name. In fact, I see Joseph of Arimathea's lands and where he had his vineyards and his fields. I see it right now from my couch, looking through the big picture window toward the north of where I am. So Ezekiel sees this river flowing from under the temple. Now, we live in this place that is mentioned in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 9, Mevaseret Sion, the proclaimer of Zion, the announcer of Zion, Mevaseret Sion. Underneath us passes the fast train to the airport, and from the airport to Tel Aviv, and from Tel Aviv to Haifa, and from Haifa to Nahariya, and then in Lod it splits and it goes south also to Beersheba. When they were digging this tunnel, a hole opened up. Not a big hole, but big enough for one or two people to crawl in it. And a lot of it went straight down. And there is a river flowing from the west to the east toward Jerusalem. Interesting. Nobody knew it until they dug that tunnel. So God again seems to have brought Ezekiel back to Jerusalem to show him this vision of the temple with a river flowing from under it. And he gives him a tour of the temple. He gives Ezekiel a tour of the temple. And he brought me out away, took him a little out of the way a little bit, to the north gate. And he brought me back to the way of the outer gate, by the way of the one facing the water. And behold, water flowing out from the right shoulder. When the man went out with the water, reed in his hand, holding a reed in his hand. He measured 1,000 with the reed, and he led me through the water by the hand of Aphasim. In other words, the guy who's guiding him is an architect. He has a measuring stick. He has a measuring reed, and he measures with him thousands of measures. I don't know what he's talking about. Inches, meters, decimeters. I don't know what kind of measuring, but he's giving us by the thousand, by the thousand, by the thousand, on the right hand, on the left hand. All this text, architectural design, are related to this water that is flowing from the temple eastward toward the Dead Sea. Now, you would say that this has no relevance to us today, because Ezekiel is there in the BC, a few hundred years BC, and he is being guided by a person we don't know whose name it is, that is guiding him through the architectural measurements of the temple grounds. Thousands of cubits here, thousands of cubits there, high, low. And I am not an architect. Hard for me to visualize it. But I actually, some years earlier painted this scenery of Jerusalem and the temple with the river flowing out of it. Maybe I'll show it to you later toward the end of the teaching. And when I returned, verse 7, behold, the bank of the brook, there was very great tree, and this kind and that kind. And he said to me, these waters issue forth into the east Galilee, and go down into the plain, and come out into the sea, the Dead Sea, and into the sea that brought forth the water shall be healed, and every living soul that moveth shall be sick, and all that comes there shall be sick, and it will live, and the fish will be very many, because these waters will come there and will heal, and everything that comes there will live, and there will be a stand, fish on it, from the well of the goats to the well of the calves, from the plain to the ravines. They will be like mine, their fish like the fish of the great sea, very many, and its outflow and its height, and not they would be healed by the salt. In other words, the salt will also be healed of the Dead Sea. And by the river shall grow up its banks into this side, and from this side shall grow up all trees for food, and it shall not be cut down. All these very interesting things that actually I painted, but I don't really know the significance of it for then and now. The only thing that I see that is very significant for me is that the waters of the Dead Sea that have a very, very high percentage of minerals and salts, important things like potassium for fertilizer around the world. One of the biggest sources of potassium in the world is the Dead Sea at the end of the Jordan. And bromide that is used in creating bombs and explosives and other things too, also as medicine. So this is the beginning of the end of the Ezekiel, the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. The healing of the Dead Sea, making it fit for many fish, according to Ezekiel. This is a very big theme, a very big theme in the restoration texts of the return of Israel back to the land. In some ways, we Israelis now in the 21st century and in the 20th century are living not only the restoration of the people to the land being restored, not only as the possession of Israel, as God promised to Abraham more than 20 times in the Bible, the land between the Jordan River and the sea is given to Israel as a perpetual inheritance. Now, I hear the Palestinian supporters in the campus of Columbia University and all over the other universities where there are riots, pro-Palestinians. Why don't they come and live in Palestine? They prefer to live in America. They prefer to live anywhere other than in Palestine. But they say this slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. The land of Israel is free for the first time since 1903, for the first time in history since the Babylonian exile and the time of the Roman occupation, because all the New Testament, the land of Israel wasn't free. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Bethlehem was not a free city. It was occupied by Romans. Right outside of Bethlehem, there was a big Roman military camp. Where I live now was the officers' quarters of the 10th Legion that crucified Jesus and destroyed the temple in 70 AD. The 10th Roman Legion. The first time since the fall of Jerusalem that Jerusalem is free in Jewish hands is now. Since the beginning of, well, actually free, literally free, since 1948. Like May 5th of 1948 is when the British were out and the Israelis and the Jews were in, ruling Jerusalem for the first time. And we have this prophecy in the Gospel of Luke that is very significant, that says that until the feet of the Romans, the sandals, they use the word that describe the sandals with the cleats that the Romans used to wear, it's a Greek word, will be delivered. After that, Israel will be saved. After the freedom of Jerusalem, Israel, this didn't happen until 1948, that Israel became a state and took control, political, economic, military, of the land of Israel and of the city of Jerusalem. Yes. So Ezekiel is seeing into the future, this river, and he sees into the future that Jerusalem will not only have a river, but it will be a healing. The tree that will grow here, I don't know if there's literally trees or not, but whatever it is going to happen here, when this prophecy is being fulfilled fully, will be a healing, a place of healing. Now I have to tell you something. We are Jews, we are disciples of Yeshua. But in our congregation, we have a family, Jonathan Miles. His kids were there when they were little. They're all grown up now, like Yuda, like Daniel, like the staff of Nativia now that is made up by some of those kids that were born and raised in Nativia. But Jonathan Miles is American, not Jewish, a dear brother and a member of our congregation. And he visited Gaza many years ago and discovered that there is a very, very big medical problem, that many babies die in Gaza under the Palestinian Authority, not under Israeli authority, under the Palestinian Authority, because they don't have proper medicine and medical services and doctors that are experts in heart surgery for newborn babies, for 1-year-old babies that are born with heart problems. So Jonathan Miles took it upon himself to go and live with his family in the refugee camp in Gaza. And any baby that was sick, he got a permit by the state of Israel to bring him to Israel, to the hospital in Tel Aviv. And the Jewish doctors in the hospital in Tel Aviv gave free service, free surgeries, heart surgeries to these children, Palestinian children. Brought them back to life, gave them life. Gave them healing for free. And Jonathan paid for the hotels and for the residences that the Arab parents of these babies that were in Hadassah Hospital in Shaarei Tzedek, in Wolfson Hospital in Tel Aviv, needed a place to stay while their children are in the hospital. And Jonathan paid for the hotels, for their food, with money he raised from Christians. So yes, Jerusalem until today is a city of healing. It has wonderful hospitals. Israel has the hospital near Tel Aviv that is 9th place of excellence in the whole world. I'm reading now, not from Ezekiel, but from Genesis 1, verse 20. The streams, waters will heal the waters of the Dead Sea, and thus the Dead Sea will become a source of life as a kind of renewed creation. And there will be every living soul that swarms similar to, and God said, let the waters swarm with the living soul. Genesis 1:20. You know what? Ezekiel, in our text here, knew this text from Genesis 1:20. And he relates what is going to happen in these last days in the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem to the act of creation, to Genesis chapter 1. The same phrase that appears in Genesis chapter 1, verse 22, appears here in our text in Ezekiel. In other words, there is a concert, a relationship between the end time and Genesis, the beginning. There is more than this in association with Ezekiel in the story of creation. I'm reading now from Genesis chapter 2. The water flowing from the temple, I'm reading now from Ezekiel, related to the phrases in Genesis chapter 2. The water flowing from the temple to the east recalls the text from Genesis. And the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it was divided and became 4 streams. And it continues with this relationship between Genesis and the end of Ezekiel. Every tree, I'm reading again, every tree that is good for food shall not wither, neither shall its fruit fail, is reminiscent of the trees of the garden. Every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food in the Garden of Eden. I like that association between the prophecies of the end time and Genesis story of creation. So Ezekiel is ending his prophetic horizons for the future by taking us back with phrases from Genesis chapter 1 and 2.